Welcome to Real Estate Meets AI, the podcast where we explore how AI is reshaping real estate, construction, and the built environment one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Sandeep Ahuja, CEO and co-founder of Cove, a full-service architecture practice that runs on AI to drive smarter, faster, and more innovative outcomes. As an architect and building scientist, I've spent the past decade helping teams turn design challenges into data-driven wins. Now, I want to get into the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of real estate, AI, and data that my industry peers and I have cultivated, applying behind-the-scenes knowledge to the trends we see in action today and deliver it directly to you. This podcast is about demystifying AI in real estate, pulling back the curtain to show you the real system, workflow, and decision-making that power our built environment. In each episode, I sit down with industry leaders, trailblazing developers, and tech innovators to unpack ideas, lessons, and real-world stories. You'll hear what's happening, what's working, what's evolving, and what it really takes to lead in an AI-driven world. This is the Real Estate Meets AI podcast. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Today, my guest is Jit Kee Chin of Suffolk Construction. Jit Kee is the Chief Technology Officer and Executive Vice President at Suffolk, where she leads big data, advanced analytics, digitization, and technology to improve construction outcomes. She also leads Suffolk Technology, an institutional-grade venture fund that invests in the built world. Jit Kee, it's so great to have you today.
It is wonderful to be here, Sandeep. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Well, to kick us off, what's the one big thing that you're excited about right now? An initiative, a shift in the market, or a problem that you're just fired up to solve?
Oh, what a great question, Sandeep. So many answers to this one. I think what I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about right now is the potential for AI to actually help reduce costs in this industry. Many facets to that, but like one, generative AI, everybody talks about it, everybody's experimenting with it and going beyond experimenting to scaling, right? But I think there is still a lot more room and a lot more potential for this new technology to really not just even do a single workflow, but like orchestrations of workflows, an entire way we operate, right? So I think we're scratching the surface, and that's very exciting. But that's also exciting only in the context of what it can do for the industry. And I think the industry is at a remarkable point in time where you have really high cost escalation. You have a severe labor shortage of like 500,000 people. You got really strong demand in terms of millions and millions of new homes that have to be built, a whole electrification of the grid, aging infrastructure. And then you also have a retirement cliff, right? Like 40% of the workforce will retire by 2031. So you look against all of this, and I think that the reason the technology is exciting is what it can do for the industry. And I'm really looking forward to that.
That's really insightful perspective, especially as you pair it with what's happening just even on a macro level with the escalations that you talk about. There's just so many trends and factors coming together that technology is uniquely positioned to, it better help us with those because they're coming no matter what.
That's right.
I love that perspective. Well, to just kind of zoom out and take the temperature on the industry itself. So I call this the AI meter. Everyone does it. I'm curious to where you think we are on this AI meter. It goes from 1 to 5. 1 means AI averse. That industry is like, please don't talk to me about AI. Not ready. And 5 being, we're here, we're using it, we love it, we're AI forward. Where do you think the construction industry is today?
Yeah, so I think we're solidly at a 3. And like, I'm not picking 3 just because it's the middle of the road and therefore it's the safe answer. Here's kind of how I think about it right now. I think 1 is just not true, right? Like AI averse, like the industry, as we talked about, has so many structural factors. Everybody's looking for a new trick. Everybody's looking to get more efficient. And so we're all leaning in. We're all trying to use AI to kind of help our businesses. 2 is what I would characterize as the quote unquote co-pilot era. And it's not that we're past the co-pilot era, but I feel like a year or 2 ago when, within the first 12 to 24 months of generative AI coming on the scene, everybody was trying to use Copilot to do something. And everybody had a company name GPT or what have you, right? I don't hear a lot about that anymore. And I think that's a good thing because in that era, people were using Copilot to try and automate back office processes. Whether not that's like generation of text or emails or job descriptions or like, to just search kind of basic documents and whatnot. That's kind of like the 2 for me. Now, it's not a 5 because it would imply we've wholesale redesigned operating models. And, it would imply that we're already there. And I definitely don't think we're already there. And four, so three or four, I will accept three or four. Three is where I think where we are today. A lot of folks have already experimented with AI tools in frontline delivery. So delivery of construction specific workflows, right?
Mhm.
That are not just like your back office workflows, typically done in partnership with other partners and have meaningfully scaled them to some degree, or would be the same folks or different folks, but they're not then just scaling tools in partnership, but they have invested in developing some meaningful level of AI capability in-house. And they've gone beyond like a single workflow and done like maybe some multi-agent orchestration or a couple of workflows and or scaled it to a department. So there's fewer of the fours. I think most folks are in the threes. But I definitely would say like, yeah, three to four. Three to four is where we are.
That is a very interesting perspective, especially as you break down how you think about each point on the scale. And I will tell you that of all the podcasts we've done this far, and of all the folks I've asked this question, I have not heard a four before. You are our first four, which gives me a lot of excitement, but also perspective into the rooms that you're in and the conversations that you're having, which will make this conversation even more insightful for all of our listeners. So I am curious, if you had to tag three areas where AI is creating real impact right now, I mean, you highlighted some of them, right? Where do you think it's currently making the folks that are 3, 4? Because back office, been there, done that, maybe. But where do you think folks are making the most impact with AI today?
So when we say AI, I also want to be clear on what we mean by AI. AI is not a new term. It's been around since the 50s and 60s. And there's been different waves of AI, generative AI being the most recent one. So some of the areas where people have seen the most impact is necessarily some of the prior waves of AI. And that includes things from machine vision to IoT and sensors to predictive analytics. You do have generative AI, and the new kid on the block is the agentic AI, right? That everyone's trying to utilize right now. So if I were to pick a few examples, I'll pick one from kind of maybe different eras. I think machine vision has totally come into its own by this point, right? And it makes total sense for construction because we are a physical industry. We put up real buildings, and this bridging of the physical and digital, and how do you use technology to represent reality on the ground in bricks and mortars and bring it into the digital world. And then the other way where you take the digital world and kind of transfer it, in effect, to be a physical manifestation. Vision has always been a great medium to do this in, and machine vision is a technology that has matured quite early on. And, in the early days, like 10 years ago when I first came into this role, people were still playing with it. Now I see just broad adoption. And use cases I hear from, on the one hand, transitioning from physical to digital, using cameras, drones, satellite imagery to then generate the tools of the trade, I call it. There's one company that Suffolk Technologies had invested in called Airworks, and what they do is they automate surveying. So you're taking imagery and you're actually generating survey drawings and saving a load of time, right? Like
Mhm.
really significant productivity
And no
increases.
one wants to do survey drawings manually.
Exactly. And there's a lot of similar things. So you can do that for surveying. There's another company that we invested in called Open Space, which I think a lot of people now know. And that's a 360 reality capture solution that captures reality but uses vision as that medium. And then you can do things like compare it to your BIM drawings. You can compare it across time. You have a platform. You can monitor progress, etc. So Open Space is not a great one. And I could go on. I could just rattle on all the machine vision use cases. And we've invested in a large number of them. These things have really driven productivity and also driven kind of a level of veracity because it does. A picture tells 1,000 words. And even if you kind of write all these things out, like just looking at a picture tells you exactly how much was put in place, as opposed to somebody's description. I think if I were to pick one from the middle of the a pack. I think predictive analytics, I certainly talked a lot about it when I came into role in 2017. I do think that is starting. It took a while. This one is not one that came easy to folks. But we've certainly seen a lot of benefit from baking predictive into how we manage. I talk
Mm.
about safety a lot. Safety is super important in this industry. And, here at Suffolk, we have seen our safety results really improve over the last, sort of 5 years, 8 years or so. And that's due to a very comprehensive safety management system that is not just data and tech. It is due to role modeling and leadership, all sorts of things. But data and tech is a component, and it's a really important component. And so here we have actually built our own predictive models around like, hey, what drives increased risks of incidents happening? Right. And then we bake all of that insights into how we manage safety.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Not to necessarily dig into that example, but I am just so curious. What's an example of what drives more risk to safety?
Yeah,
Like,
loads of
just even like one example, just so that it contextualizes it.
when you go and talk to sort of everyone in the field, everybody has their gut feelings. Like
Totally.
I've been a superintendent for 50 years and I know exactly what drives safety. And everybody will have that gut feelings. What we've done is we've collected all these gut feelings and then we've tested it against the data. And then
Yeah.
we've built a model that will like at any given point sort of, give you a risk prediction for a particular project because of like analytically proven factors in our company that has been shown to drive safety. So an example would be a big component of our safety management program is around taking observations of risk behavior and also, positive safety behaviors. Role modeling doesn't always have to be negative, but the risk behaviors then drives a culture of like role modeling that, hey, as the general contractor on a site, we care. We care that like every trade partner goes home safe to their families. We care to have a conversation when we see something not being done quite right. And that observation that the tech, like I say, underpins that behavior modification that we want. And we make sure that if we see something unsafe, that we make that observation, we have a conversation, and then we close out that issue, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, great, that sounds right. But like, how many observations are enough? What should your expectation be? Who should be taking these observations? And through the analytics that we've done, we know that there is a certain number beyond without safety incidents, like a certain ratio of observations to trade hours. So how many people on site doing work that does correlate to a direct drop in incident rates. And so now we put that in our expectation for our field professionals to follow, right? We also know that it's not just about the safety manager making observations. We know that if the whole project team role models this, the safety outcome is better. So lots of these things that are not sort of rocket science for your experienced superintendent on the field, right? Or your experienced project executive, but it helps to have the numbers and it helps to have the numbers to set expectations and to convince folks and to show like, hey, this isn't a box checking exercise.
Oh, I couldn't agree
Really
more.
works.
Because no one wants rules unless there's a reason for it. Even if, obviously, to your point, an experienced professional would do that regardless and would implement that regardless. But it probably even helps these more experienced superintendents to be like, look, this is why.
Yeah, that's right. There are many ways to influence, and certainly data and facts is one way to influence when other avenues are, not working out, if you like, right? And so maybe then the last example I'll give, which is kind of more on the generative AI, agentic AI, the kind of the new kid on the block, if you like. I think construction knowledge is very complex, or construction data is very heterogeneous. You got drawings, you got schedules, you got text, you got PDFs, you got like your financials, and it's complicated. And the multimodal models that we have right now are starting to get there where I genuinely think generative AI has a lot of potential to help us simplify the search and retrieve of documents to help us build better. It sounds simple, but it's not. And I would say that right now, like searching and retrieving of textual information is totally there. We have teams that have tried tools like Trunk Tools and others that are using it to help prepare for meetings, to help retrieve specifications and knowledge that they need to build in some point in time. It's just saving them a load of time rather than having to dig through file folders for it. The technology needs to get better. The searching of drawings, the visual models can get better, but it's well on its way. I think close behind that is then the automation of various checks, checking for code compliance, checking for clashes, checking that your specifications match to your submittals. These types of checks, which again take up a ton of time and is super important because if you get this wrong in the field, you get a lot of additional costs that you don't necessarily want to incur. And it's what's driving up the cost of construction. So really excited about that too. And we're starting to see some of these use cases get to a point where you can really scale it and see a meaningful difference in outcomes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, specifically with hands-on experience. I will say with the more generative AI side of things, which is obviously what we use and what we've developed here at Cove. I mean, once our designers are done with their work, like basically during the night, it runs compliance checks, energy modeling checks. Does every
Yep.
room have daylight checks? Like all of these reports that folks come in every morning and be like, okay, yeah, we're good. Or no, 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 we missed that. Or oh my gosh, we spent too many hours designing this. We don't have enough hours to do that. There's just so much that our own AI helps us with. And I would imagine that that same journey transfers even further on the construction side of things because again, we get the permitted set, we're out of it, but then it's down to getting it built right.
That's right. That's right.
Super, super fascinating and definitely the world that I can appreciate where the more agentic and generative AIs can have a pretty critical point. So I am curious of the many examples that you described and of the many things that obviously you're exposed to from your role, whether from a technology investing world standpoint or just being the CTO standpoint. What's some of the more forward thinking things that you guys are using hands on, over at Suffolk? The example that you painted with reducing risk and improving safety, I thought that's an example that really resonated well for me. I'm curious if there's an example that comes to mind on the more generative AI front.
In terms of like the use case that we're using, to mean,
Yeah.
or? Well, searching for information and the using of that search to prepare for all sorts of things is one that we're actively using right now.
Oh,
We use
fascinating.
Yeah, we use a tool called Trunk Tools. The product's called Trunk Text, but we have it on project teams where they use it to prepare for meetings. They use it to search and retrieve documents that help them build, and they have rolled out new products that will allow you to now do automated checks, which we are also using. We're using another solution to help us with procurement and delivery to kind of review documents and pull out what the right procurement and delivery timelines are. And that is sort of generative AI to generate like schedules, like the number of, construction well, but like you got to generate all these different schedules based on like all the submittals that has been produced, all of the materials that need to show up on site. People say like all of construction is about making sure the right people show up at the right time and has the right set of tools and materials to do what they need to do.
A very non sexy problem, but totally critical to solve.
It's totally central to construction. And all of that coordination takes so much time. So the usage of agents to automatically scan through the documents, pull everything out, put things in like nice lists and whatnot that you can hand off to the right person to sort of manage and make sure it happens. That again, not very sexy, but saves a lot of time.
Yeah.
So that's things that we're experiencing right now. One thing that I do think is less prevalent, but is increasingly getting more so, is to use AI to actually generate scenarios and simulations so that you can take better decisions on a site. So the classic example people use is like schedule. Things happen all the time on a job, right? And when things happen, you got to resequence your schedule. You got to make sure that you still hit your timelines. But schedules are complicated things. The powerful tools that will help us actually do the schedule simulation and do different trade-offs. If I add more people, what's that going to do? But how much additional cost for how much schedule savings? There was no good way to do these trade-offs before, but tools are coming online now that's allowing us to do this. And that's very exciting.
That's really fascinating. So, obviously, based on everything you've told me over the last 10, 15 minutes, the one thing I can say for a fact is that AI, all three typologies of it, the vision, just the more analytical approach and predictive approach, the generative AI approach, it's all around Suffolk Construction. You guys are using it in so many different aspects. What I am curious is how does that happen? Obviously, you guys have been around a good long time. Change is hard for, I hear, most large companies. We're a startup. We change pretty easy. I hear it's typically hard for large companies. How do you guys make all of this innovation and change happen?
My goodness, I don't think we have enough time in this podcast to like talk about all of that.
In a nutshell, if I may say.
It's a long journey. I think on this one, you got to start with the right leadership and the right culture. And I think about that as the topping and tailing, right? I think we've always been very fortunate in that our CEO, chair, and shareholder, John Fish, has always been a very visionary, very innovative, very dynamic leader. And he's always leaning forwards to find new ways of doing what we need to do. So when he created my original role 8.5 years ago at Suffolk as the chief data officer, there was no other such role that at least I knew of in construction. But he leaned forward because he knew it was an area that a lot of other industries had found a lot of value in. Construction was late to the game, but that there was undoubtedly value that could be had from harnessing our data and utilizing it better. And so he leaned forward and made that investment and created that role. And I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity to take the role and try to build that journey. And that's been true of every chapter, and it's true of the AI chapter too. So John's very committed. That definitely helps because that sets a tone for the organization. I do think there is something about the culture of the organization. And we were fortunate to start with a very innovative culture. Folks that like us and join us generally are looking for ways to do things better. So that helps as your starting point. I think then to drive change, you need a balance. You need to create a space for experimentation and the capacity for experimentation. But then you need a process for how you move experimentation to scale and recognize that the skill sets and what you need to do to take it from experiment to scale is different.
Mhm.
We went through quite a lot of iterations of that. Like, how do you set up that organization? Who should do what? What is the teams that need to be in place, right? And how do we couple to the projects? And the structure we've landed on now is that we have a team that does the experiments. Like the DNA of this team, agile, externally focused, couples to the open ecosystem, tries and fails fast within certain guardrails. Things need to prove their value. Once they've proven their value, there's a longer debate. Like, okay, now we're going to do a pilot. Pilot's a little bit more scaled, 3 to 5 jobs. How do we pick the jobs to make sure there's sufficient representation? What's that process by which you'll understand and the criteria by which you'll understand when this is truly scalable across a broader swath of jobs? And let's conduct these pilots with a little bit more structure. Classic readouts, check-ins, detailed. And then beyond that, now you're going into scaled rollout if you pass that gate and you're saying like, okay, how does this fit into my process? I think most companies fail on that. They're like, oh, this is cool. But like, how does it really fit into my process? And have I thought through, then changed that process and then communicated and trained on that change, right? So now you're talking comms, you're talking training programs, you're talking change management and rollout. And that's a different skill set. And so that goes to a different part of the organization. All parts of the organization need to talk, but we just sort of recognize that as things mature, they need different levels of support. And I think we've been thoughtful about how we give that support and where we give that support in order to actually drive this change.
You did do it in a nutshell, and it was just a few minutes. And I think what the most thoughtful part, which I think you're exactly right based on everything that I've seen, is that the piloting phase one or two, as you describe it, and I mean, some companies don't have phase one, two, three. It's phase one and phase two. One, we tried it. Two, it's everywhere, right? But even the scaled approach within the pilot, that's where most companies stop because it's the last part and just realizing that it actually takes time and
Hardest
resources
part.
to spread it everywhere. It's not going to happen with one webinar. It's not going to happen with, "Hey, let's do it." That's not enough. I
Yeah.
think that's the methodological process that really makes beautiful scale happen. And I really like how you described it.
Well, thank you.
All right, let's move to a little bit more fun part of the podcast. I'm going to ask you a bunch of rapid fire questions. Just the first thing that comes to mind. So, are you a coffee or a tea or no caffeine person?
No caffeine coffee. I switched to decaf a while ago.
Oh my goodness. Okay, one workflow AI won't fix soon, and that's okay. It can be totally not construction related. It could be picking out my wardrobe, for example.
Yeah, AI is not going to pick up my wardrobe, that's for sure. I think one workflow AI is not going to fix anytime soon is this. It's not a workflow, but it's an aspect. You can't use AI to build relationships. You still got to sit down and talk to people, and relationships is what gets things done. So, not fixing that anytime soon.
Nor should it probably.
It should never. It never. Part of relationships too that AI can't replace is that it can't give joy. Like you get a lot of energy and joy in connecting with people. AI ain't replacing that.
Nope. Like no AI could give us this joy that we're having in this conversation. All right. And lastly, if you could standardize one data set across the entire construction industry, what would it be?
Everybody talks about the BIM data set, the schema, what's the terminology, how do you label different things. That would
Yeah.
be amazing. That journey's been like decades in the making. So, look, if we can get there, that'd be cool.
Love it. All right. Well, let's land this plane. What's one piece of advice that you would give to other leaders navigating change?
I would say be courageous and take that first step. If you're being held back because like the enormity of it is kind of too vast, or if you don't have the perfect plan, or if the road's not charted, at least for me, I think that if you're navigating change, particularly in a field that's not yet written, like data was 8 years ago or AI is now, pick the right team and just have faith that the team's going to figure it out. Every plan's perfect till it hits battle and on day one, and then you got to change the plan anyway. So
That's right. That's right. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Jit Kee, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I love your perspective, and I know so will our listeners.
well, thank you very much, Sandeep. It's been a really fun chat. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Real Estate Meets AI podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the Real Estate Meets AI podcast on your favorite streaming platform and follow us on social media at cove.inc. Until next time, I'm Sandeep Ahuja.